Hi there, my name is Cristiana Stelos and I will be your host throughout this series. The series of video tutorials is designed to teach you about one of the most commonly used database languages in the world, SQL. The acronym stands for Structured Query Language, but everybody nowadays calls it SQL. It was originally invented by IBM in 1985, but today we're using a variant of SQL that is standardized by the American National Standards Institute. You'll find this useful no matter what type of database platform you're working with. You can take the same set of skills and use it over and over and over again in different places. So, we're going to start with this brief introduction in which we're going to talk about each chapter of this series of video tutorials. In video number 2, we are going to cover some basic database concepts, some terminology that we're going to use over this course. I strongly recommend you not to skip this one. It's very important that we make sure we're on the same page with all the different words that we're going to use, and it's going to make your learning much more smoother along the way. In video number 3, we're going to start to talk about more interesting stuff, like how to select data from a database. Basic filtering, sorting, basically useful stuff that you normally do when pulling data out of a database. In video number 4, we're going to dive into filtering. We'll look at getting just the data that you want out of the database. We're going to look at different comparison operators like in between. We're going to look at Boolean operators, date delimiters, and even some advanced stuff that can really do neat things. Video number 5 is where we're going to take select just a bit further and talk about scalar functions. Scalar functions are used to manipulate the data that's coming out of the database, like turning them into lowercase or perform basic math operation on that data. Video number 6 is where we're going to jump into aggregate functions, also known as set functions. You can produce sums and totals, minimums and averages, and we'll look at producing something that is called summary reports using the SQL keyword group by and having. In video number 7, we'll take a look at advanced tricks that go along with selecting data, like selecting a subset of data that matches our criteria, subqueries, table and column aliasing, selecting just distinct values, and even casting different types of data in other types of data so you can use it in other different situations. In video number 8, we're going to leave selecting data behind for a moment, and we're going to talk about inserting, updating, and deleting data. Those are the 3 basic queries that form the foundation of SQL language. In video number 9, we're going to come back to select, and we're going to learn how to select data from multiple related tables all at the same time. In video number 10, we'll take that thing a little bit further and look at some more advanced multi-table queries, things that you might not need to use every single time, but when you need to, it will be very handy and we're going to help you a lot in your SQL queries. Video 11 covers some common SQL functions like numeric functions, string functions, date functions, some of which we already covered in video number 5, but this time we're going to talk more about them and cover much more aspects. Video number 12 is where we're going to dive into transactions, which are a way of telling the database platform, well, I want to run several commands now, and I either want all of them to succeed as a unit, or I don't want any of them to happen at all. It's a really good way to wrap up more complex processes in a single atomic transactions. We learn how to declare those, how to use them, and how the database platform actually implements those under the hood. In 13, we look at data definition. Some kind of basic of how to define new data or to create new tables inside a database, but not using a platform user interface, but rather using SQL language. In video 14, we're really going to focus on relational data. We're going to cover some of the basics of this in video number 2 for you to be ready to start, but in video number 14 we're going to dive in deep and talk about primary keys, foreign key constraints, not null constraints, all the types of things that can help your database management platform enforce data integrity. 15 will be about speeding up and slowing down queries. That's right, we're going to talk about indexing. We'll talk about some concepts behind indexing, look at how to create indexes using the SQL language rather than a particular graphical user interface. We're going to look how indexes can eventually break down over time, how to rebuild them, drop them, reindex them, and so on. Video 16 is very important. If you're going to work with SQL in a sort of development environment, I want you to understand what an SQL injection attack is, how it works, how to avoid it. We're going to talk about escaping data using stored procedures, which can get a bit platform dependent on how to implement those. But we're going to talk more about the techniques rather than the actual implementation, just so you know how to handle this kind of security problems. In 17, we'll look at tools that work with several SQL platforms, web-based things that work with MySQL, also Microsoft SQL Server. We're going to look at some other MySQL type tools so that you can get an idea of the variety that is out there. So if you find yourself working with Oracle and MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server, you'll know how you can do all of that from a single tool so you can get comfortable with and efficient with that tool so you can reuse the code in different platforms. Going on to video number 18, we'll look at cursors. A way of taking a set of data and working with it one row at a time rather than working on an entire batch of data the way SQL normally prefers to. We'll talk about some concepts behind cursors, how to open one, how to close one, and we're going to talk about some of the downsides of working with cursors. I don't want you to think that this is something that you need to do every single time, but rather look at some situations in which cursors can really slow down things in terms of performance. In 19, we'll talk about database design principles. If you're working with database and SQL language, chances are that you'll eventually find yourself in the situation where you'll have to design a database from scratch. We'll run through an example of database normalization. We're going to talk about the first, the second, and the third normal form. We'll also look at the concept of denormalization, when it's time to disobey the rules to create a better performing application or to meet certain business needs. 20 will be about advanced database capabilities, things that are defined by the American National Standards Institute standards, but may be implemented slightly different from platform to platform. We'll talk about triggers, XML data, background jobs, again focusing on the techniques more and capabilities and a little bit less on specific platform implementation. Once you know that the option exists and know what it's used for, it's easier for you to go to your syntax manual and look at the exact formula to implement the capability. The trick is to know what the capability does, what it's used for, and what the benefits from it are. That being said, I think we're ready to start. I hope this has been informative for you and would like to thank you for watching. Tune in for the next video.